This is Ask Lisa, a podcast to help people understand the psychology of parenting, now in the midst of a pandemic. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Damour, author of 2 New York Times best-selling parenting books, takes your questions. And I'm co-host Reena, a journalist and mom of 2. Some of what we talk about comes from raising children ourselves. Most of the time, I'll be getting answers to your parenting questions. So send your questions to Ask Lisa at drlisadamour.com. Episode 24, My Daughter's Questioning Her Gender. What do I do? My brother, whose daughter's in kindergarten, had her first play date outside and didn't know what to do because she hasn't been in school yet. And it was sort of this awkward stage, he was saying, but it made me think about the milestones that kids are missing in this pandemic. Of course they'll make it up, but you can't help but think what your child is missing.
Yeah, no, it's, and playdates are hard under normal conditions, and I can't even picture, at least he's in Texas, where I presume they can be outside pretty comfortably.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's what's made all the difference. And one of the letters that we got in our inbox today stood out about some of the things that you might not be thinking about as a parent, but as a community, how can we help people and how can we help our kids? And this one says, Dear Lisa, about a month ago, I found evidence that my 14-year-old daughter, who's a freshman in virtual high school, had changed her pronouns from she, her to they, them. I immediately mentioned it, and she confirmed it and also said that she wants to wear a chest binder. I've been plunged into sadness, anger, and embarrassment. Simply talking to her has become a minefield. How can I possibly come back to the loving and connected space I thought we had just a few short weeks ago? As a single mom to an only child, I walk a tightrope where I'm fine financially, emotionally, unless something goes wrong. That my only child would bring this stress upon us has me so angry. I understand that she sees this quite differently. Please help. God, there's so much in this letter that
There's
just makes...
so much.
What do you say to this mom?
Ooh. Well, the first thing I would say is this is really complicated. And that's important, I think, as a position to begin with. And I think this mom is well aware of that. But this is something that you sometimes see the conversation get very, very polarized very quickly, where there's this sense of like, this is not okay for this kid to do this, or we have to support this kid 100%. Questioning is a terrible thing to do. And I walk up to this as a psychologist. I'm like, okay, this is really complicated. And I guess the place that I would want to enter this is to set apart from each other outcome and process. So here's what I mean. This kiddo's 14. I've seen a lot of different outcomes from the moment this mother is describing. So, for instance, sometimes kiddos in this position do go on over time to really deepen a sense that they don't like the gender they were assigned at birth, do feel that they identify much more closely with the opposite gender, and continue to evolve into a position where they really outwardly change their gender and have always felt like that the new outward gender fits with their internal sense of gender. So sometimes that's the outcome. Okay, that's one. Another outcome that I see is that, gender is fluid.
It's interesting to hear you say gender is fluid. What do you mean by that? Like, I've always known that I'm attracted to guys, right? But are you saying to me that can change for me?
Well, that's interesting. So there's gender and there's sexual orientation. So those two things are also separate from each other, which is, when I say this is complicated, it is super complicated. Okay, so let's start there. So one thing that we know is that who one sees oneself to be, which is what we really call gender. So I see myself to be female. I happen to be biologically female. That's my gender. It lines up with my, birth sex. You see yourself to be female. You happen to be biologically female. Okay, that's your gender. Separate from that is who rings our bell, right? Mm-hmm. So I, too, identify as straight. But that also, right, in terms of sexual orientation, just like gender occurs on a continuum, and we'll come back to that, sexual orientation occurs on a continuum, and it can be fluid. So you are attracted to men. I am attracted to men. I'm married to a man. Can I see a beautiful woman and feel something that's like in the neighborhood of attraction? Yeah. Like I can. Like I can see a beautiful woman and be like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. I want to look at her.
Absolutely.
And then I think, do I want to kiss her? No, it doesn't go there for me. But I'm aware, and I think most people, there are very few people who are 100% straight and 100% gay. And also, people move around in their lifetime. So there are people who like date women in college and then they marry men. Okay, let's say this is a woman. Was she never gay? No, it's all part of an evolving sexual identity. So it's also, there's so many moving parts. And I think that's why it becomes so complicated.
Evolving sexual identity. That's something that just stands out. So what does it mean, Lisa, to question it, right? Because initially, I think how a lot of parents may react, oh, she's hanging out with the wrong crowd. Got to get her out of her.
Well, so this exactly gets to the process versus outcome, right? So the parent might be like, okay, outcome, I don't want it going down this road. I'm going to try to get it off this road. That is an outcome-driven approach for the parent, which in a situation like this is probably not going to go well. And the reason I say situation like this is the kid has all the power. At the end of the day, the kid has all the power, and certainly around a gender identity, the kid should have all the power. But if a parent decides they're going to drive this, like I want it to go down this road, and it's a different road than my kid has said that he or she feels themselves to be on, now you're walking into a huge power struggle, which is not where you want to be. So let's think about how to stay away from that. But I just want to come back on that idea of gender identity being fluid. When we talk about kids, and the various outcomes I've seen, another outcome I've seen is kids who have a time, and maybe, around 14, where they're like, maybe I'm more masculine than I realized, and I want to take a walk around that neighborhood. And then they're in that neighborhood for a while, and then they're like, okay, now I feel done with that neighborhood, and I'm into a different neighborhood of gender identity where I actually feel more feminine than I thought I was.
Well, that's the problem is, as a parent, you're thinking, child, you are 14. You do not know what you want, right? You're developing. No. And you want to shut it down.
Well, I think it's, okay, so, but that's so interesting. Like those two, that jump from kiddo, this outcome is unclear, to I want to shut it down, right? That's actually, it's the first place we can hang out in. And I think we can actually help this mom and her kiddo come back together. It's the I want to shut it down that's going to create the great wedge between this mom and this child. So, because the other possibility that I've seen is that in the search for identity, which if you think about a time when kiddos are searching for identity, right, 13, 14, and especially in a virtual world where it's so hard to feel connected, I've absolutely seen kids who their friendship group that starts to become available to them, the questioning of gender is very much a norm within that friendship group. And so then the child adopts that norm, and then as friendships evolve and change, that falls away and the gender questions fall away too, right? So this could go so many different directions.
But Lisa, in this letter, she's talking about chest binding.
Yeah.
This, daughter wants to bind her chest.
Yeah.
And how do you, and I'm sure there are some children who might want to take hormones or do certain things. And as a parent, when they are still developing and to commit to that, how do you wrestle that?
Well, it's interesting because that word commit, right? So in some ways, chest binding, you could change your mind tomorrow. And so that's more straightforward in some ways for parents because, it's not a big commitment, whereas something like hormones could feel like a bigger commitment. But so these are all so thorny. So if we go with the idea of you can't really drive the outcome, it gets really thorny really fast. You want to go to process. Okay, so what's the process? How is a parent supposed to be in this moment to try to stay close to a kid and not alienate a child? And one of the things that I've really come to learn about teenagers is they really respect total honesty. Like they really respect total transparency. So on any super thorny, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what to do, I don't want to alienate my kid moment in parenting, which happens a lot, my advice to parents might be, try thinking out loud in front of your kid. Try thinking out loud for them to hear what you yourself are struggling with.
So what do you mean by that, thinking out loud? Like it's okay to process it with your child as you go?
I think so. Oh. So if I imagine this mom, the kinds of things I could picture her saying might be something like, okay, I feel really torn. Part of me doesn't want to seem to be any less than supportive, right? Part of me wants to back you in anything and in no way seem to be diminishing or doubting, especially around something as precious as one's gender identity. The other part of me just found out about this and is a little bit surprised. And maybe you've been thinking about this for a while, but it's really new to me. And as your mom, like your gender is not a minor issue in my universe. And like, I need a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Or the parent could say, look, I will support you all the way wherever this process takes you. That is true. And side by side with that, I know, and I suspect you, kiddo, know that to be unconventional in one's gender in today's society still is going to make your life harder, is potentially very dangerous for you, right?
Yeah.
People can lethal force against people who are transgender. And as someone who loves you down to the marrow, it's pretty unsettling for me to get this news that you're thinking in this direction, because your security and safety in the world means more to me than anything. So don't mistake my hesitation, doubt, worry for not validating you. It's me thinking out loud or me being in touch with the meaning of what you're saying.
That's interesting. So maybe that, I just felt this mom when she says, how do I go back to just 4 weeks ago where we had that warmth, I want to go back to that place. But you're saying to me, sometimes processing it with them and letting them know that you're openly processing it can help.
I think it can. And I also think, 14-year-olds are pretty sophisticated thinkers usually, or they are becoming very sophisticated thinkers. So they can usually step up to this idea of like, look, kiddo, like this is complicated, right? And I'm not going to simplify it. What's hard with kids sometimes, especially on the younger side of adolescence, is they do want to oversimplify it. They're like, either you're with me or against me. I have declared this. You're being unsupportive. And I think where parents don't want to go is to fall into that kid's, are you on my team or are you not on my team? Right? Because it's not like that. It's like, well, of course I'm on your team, but like, kiddo, this is big. And another thing that we can say in these moments, and this expands to all sorts of dilemmas in parenting, is we can say, well, wouldn't it be weird if I were like, okay, whatever, that's cool. You want to go buy he? Okay, what do you want for lunch? Like, wouldn't it be weird if I didn't sit with this and think about it and like try to weigh the implications?
Yeah. Do you feel that kids, by kids I mean, like teens right now, see this in an easier way than adults do? Like, I feel like we grapple with this in a much harder way.
I think that's right. And one of the words that caught my ear in the letter was the mom feeling embarrassed.
Embarrassed
about this. And when I heard that, I thought, okay, well, this is really interesting, because what I have noted is there's a big divide generationally between how parents see unconventional gender and how kids see it.
Yeah.
Kids, it's kind of actually amazing to me how much of a distinction there is. But kids are like way more relaxed about all this than parents are, even parents who see themselves to be very liberal and progressive. So on both gender identity and sexual orientation, kids I know in the younger generation, they're like, yeah, I don't know, like, this kiddo's going by they, them, okay. Like and then they just like, they move on quite quickly. Or I love this. One of my really dear friends has her very straight son who was a college athlete. She said to me in sort of having a conversation about like how different the younger generation's take on all of these things is than sometimes the parents' generation. She said, so it wasn't until like several months in to rooming with his freshman roommate that my son happened to mention that his roommate was gay. She said it was such a issue for him.
Yeah.
And she said, not that we care either, but just like, that just would have been a thing when we were in college.
Yeah.
And it's just not a thing for kids today in the same way. So one hopefully maybe point of ease for this mother is to know that, all right, you may have your own worries about how this is going to play at Thanksgiving with your relatives. And so, we have to think that through perhaps. But in terms of worrying that your, I'll call her your daughter, is somehow, harming herself socially or doing, pigeonholing herself into a position she cannot possibly get out of, actually, I wouldn't worry about that so much. That is less of an issue for kids.
Because I feel like that was like one of the biggest issues in this. I want to ask you, though, it's amazing, like the point that we're at, because, President Biden has nominated Dr. Rachel Levine to be Assistant Secretary of Health, who is openly transgender and will be one of the first openly transgender federal officials to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. You're seeing more examples, I think, which is really important. But I want to step back for a second and actually talk about sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. What if your child comes out and says, or you might think potentially your child is gay? What should you do?
That's also, I love these questions because they're so hard. So here's what I've done as a parent. I've actually worked with the premise that I don't know who my daughters are going to love. And I've worked with that premise for a really long time. And I think in part just because of the work I do, I think about these things in terms of where I've seen them go awry. And so one thing I've done as a parent from the earliest days, I don't know, do you ever do this with your kids where like you talk about their future marriages or their weddings or like, you know how sometimes kids do that? They're like, when I get married, we're going to have 14 dogs, right?
Yeah.
And so when those conversations have come up, I've always said, oh, well, maybe your spouse is going to have some opinion on this, or maybe your partner is going to have a point of view.
I say partner, yes.
Yeah. So I don't ever say husband. And I've never like said to them, do you notice how I don't say husband? I just sort of like, just say, maybe the person you're with is going to have some ideas about this too. Because I'm so aware of kids I've cared for in my practice who are gay, have known themselves to be gay, and for whom coming out to their parents was made harder by the presumption of heterosexuality, which is, an overriding presumption in our culture. And so that's a place to start. I guess then, anytime, if we think about that moment of a kid coming out to parents, right, there's like 400 contextual variables at work. So one is, how the parents themselves feel about homosexuality, and there's a diverse array on that. Another is how surprised the parents are. Because there are plenty of parents who are like, we know, right? Like they're like, we've known for a really long time. Versus parents who are like, oh, okay. And I guess, again, I would not, you can't drive that outcome. You cannot drive that outcome as a parent. Don't try to drive that outcome. Go to process. And by go to process, to the degree that you're conflicted, lay it on the table. Just lay it on the table. Mm-hmm. Just say, be open. We've known for a long time, or wow, we're kind of surprised, or okay, and we'll support you all the way, and wow, we love you so much, and we worry that this is a complexity and a wrinkle that is coming into your life or has maybe been part of your life for a long time, and we're here to support you, but we're aware that this is something that is not altogether straightforward in our country and not altogether easy in our country. Just to lay it out, but move out of the position of a parent of I need to know how this is supposed to come out and I need to get it there.
Which is where we all want to go instantly, you want it resolved. But I want to ask you, what if you don't know? What if you just have no clue whether your child is gay or straight? How do you play it that way?
So the kid has come out, but you're like, I'm not so sure.
Or what if they haven't come out? You have your doubts, but you want to be supportive. What can parents do when you're just unsure? Hey, this child could be gay or could be straight. I don't know.
Love them like crazy. I just think it's more about showing them what love should look like, right? And so whoever they end up loving or whoever they end up choosing, just use your parent-child relationship to show them that love is respectful and decent and, incredibly kind, and the conflict is handled in a really healthy way. And if they happen to, land on having love with someone who's of the same sex or the opposite sex, that's really what you want, right? Yeah. Is that they understand how relationships work. But I would... There's an interesting thing. I would just, aim to be close with a kiddo and lay out your thinking and your conflict, in a really earnest and honest way. And here's something that's really interesting. When I was researching under Untangled, actually, a long time ago, I came across this research finding that really stayed with me around kids coming out to their parents. And it's sometimes being quite a bit harder when the parent and child are very close, because the child is that much more fearful of damaging the relationship.
Interesting.
That much more fearful of the parent's response. Whereas if the parent and child are sort of already, kind of distant or at odds, there's less at stake.
Oh, interesting. Can I just say, Lisa, before we wrap it up, the other thing that stood out in this letter, single mom. Oh. Single mom.
With an only child.
With an only child. What's your advice to folks who are parenting alone, both dads and moms? Because we've got a lot of dads that also listen to this podcast. We never want you guys to feel isolated. We're grateful for you as well. What do you say to single parents, especially in this pandemic?
Oh, my Lord. Okay, so first of all, there should be medals for being a single parent.
Yes.
And especially for being a single parent of a teenager. Because when I work clinically, in terms of when I think about what are the most excruciating scenarios I've seen, to be the single parent of a kid who's mad at you, or a kid you're at odds with, like this mom and this kiddo are, it is brutal. You are in the house together. That kid is snarky or angry or dark with you, and you have no one who you can go into your bedroom and who's like, it's okay, I've got you. And it just, it is so hard. And sometimes, and so even the only child piece, sometimes the other kid is still liking you. And so you can take comfort in
right,
that.
True.
So, okay, so what would I say? So if you are a single parent, we love you and we are sending our love and support your way and you deserve all the medals in the world. If you know a single parent, when did you call them lately? And say, how are you? And do you need any parenting backup or just someone to tell you you're great? And then tell them how awesome their kid is. Tell them how awesome their kid is. Because that's the other thing that's really fun sometimes about having a partner is that you can be like, oh my God, the kids are really awesome right now. And you can share that. And so I think if you're like, I got to tell you, I saw, your son on the playground the other day and a kiddo fell down and everybody else ran away. And your son was the kid who stopped and asked him if he was all right. I was blown away by what your kid did. I mean, things like that, do that. Don't hold that back.
It's so important to say that and to hear that. We all love to hear that, right? When it's genuine. And every episode, I learn so much from you as your friend and co-host.
Well, I am so blown away by the intimacy of the questions.
Yeah.
We are being, I'm going to say blessed with.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a great word.
That I am just so honored that we have parents trusting us with their hearts.
Which is a big step to take.
Yeah.
Very big step.
And so thank you, parents.
You mentioned Untangled. And so for this week, we're all about throwing resources at parents. We're going to throw an amazing resource. Our book giveaway is Untangled.
Should we do it? Should we give away Untangled?
Let's give away your book. I give it to people, before you and I even started this podcast, because it is like a Bible. Everybody should read it.
So Untangled came out in 2016, which now feels like a lifetime ago. And the subtitle is Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood. But here's what I hear all the time. 80% applies to boys.
True.
And what I do in that book is I lay out the developmental passages of being a teenager. And actually in Untangled, I spend time on a story of a family whose daughter was coming out to them and they were struggling with how to think it through.
Wow, right.
So I'll do 3 signed copies. I'll sign them and mail them. How do we do the giveaway, Reena?
So all you have to do is follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Ask Lisa Podcast, tag a friend, leave a comment on Instagram or Facebook or both. And you can enter as many times as you like, enter as many people as you want, but you have to be a U.S. resident for now. But even if you aren't, leave us a post if you're from another country, because we might have to open it up internationally at some point. And then we'll let you know on Instagram and Facebook who the winners are. And it'll be open until our next podcast comes out, which is the following Tuesday.
All right.
So what do you have for us for Parenting to Go?
So I'm going to quote a writer named Lisa Sellen Davis, who wrote a book called Tomboy, that I recently reviewed for the New York Times Book Review. And it's just about, gender in girls and how we've thought about it both historically and also currently. And she said something in the book that I just thought was so right on. She said, the only way to do gender wrong is to tell someone else they're doing gender wrong. Mm. And I thought, well, that just is exactly down to the nub of it. So I would just say as we think it through as parents and watch our kids figure out what it means to do gender, and as kids come home to us and talk about other kids figuring out what it means to do gender, I think let's just steer clear of telling someone they're doing it wrong.
Great advice. Such great advice. Thank you so much, Lisa.
See you next week.
I'll see you next week. And a reminder, listeners, you can always send us your questions or comments to asklisa@drlisadamour.com. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Ask Lisa podcast so you get the episodes just as soon as they drop. And send us your questions to asklisa@drlisadamour.com. And now a word from our lawyers. The advice provided on this podcast does not constitute or serve as a substitute for professional psychological treatment, therapy, or other types of professional advice or intervention. If you have concerns about your child's well-being, consult a physician or mental health professional. If you're looking for additional resources, check out Lisa's website at drlisadamour.com. We'll see you next week.